Hey guys, have another book review for you today. This time we are reviewing No Risk Ranching Custom Grazing on Leased Land by Greg Judy. Just a quick note, I will be going out to do an internship at Greg Judy's farm, and I'm leaving in a few days. So I thought it was fitting to do a review of his book. And basically, this book is about how to minimize your risk and get into ranching, raising cattle or sheep or goats, okay, something like that. And he talks about a lot of different ways you can do that. Um, Here's the table of contents. Let me show it to you real quick. Okay, there you go. And I do want to make one quick note before we start. Greg talks about management intensive grazing in this book, and I know for a fact he is no longer practicing that necessarily. He is actually practicing mob grazing. And you can find out about mob grazing by Googling Holistic Management International or Google Allen Savory, just like the spice is spelled, I believe. Okay? So when you read this book, his grazing methods have changed, so you'll want to familiarize yourself with the other methods of grazing because he's moved on to that and it is better. So just a quick note for you guys. Custom grazing with leased land equals money. That is the first chapter, and he basically outlines how he was bankrupt or going bankrupt, and custom grazing actually saved his butt, and he was able to, get out of that bankruptcy and move on into a profitable business. Um, a cool chapter in here, the next chapter, is forming the correct personal attitude, and you don't really hear how-to books necessarily always describe that, at least of this nature, so that was cool. Talks about setting goals, which is good, and reviewing your goals. I think he says quarterly, which is good. I started doing that after I read this book, and it is really cool. You get to check things off that you've accomplished. So he talks about the advantages of leasing and owning land, and this is really eye-opening. The cost of owning land is enormous. So unless you're inheriting your land or you're independently wealthy, this will potentially be your biggest expense. It's quite a leap of faith to go out there and buy land when you don't have much experience in farming or ranching, and that's kind of who this book is catered towards. Okay, but if you've been farming and ranching for 50 years, you could also read this book and learn a lot. Um, and then he, basically leasing land is much cheaper, and the rules of the game have changed as far as farming is concerned. Because the cost of land has become prohibitive, that leasing land is the way to go once you're getting started. And he's not against owning land; he owns land himself. Um, and then he gives you tips for finding idle land to lease. And the next topic is show them what you've got. Actually, let me go back. Tips for finding idle land to lease. I took the tips, his recommendations in this book, and I actually put them to practice. And I can tell you that they work for sure. You just have to be really persistent, and it worked for me. He then goes on to talk about if you can show a potential landowner what you've been doing with your cows using the mob grazing, then you'll have a much better opportunity, or the likelihood of him leasing his land to you will increase greatly because you can say, hey, look at what I've done with this land, look how much I've improved it. And then the next subject on page 48 is calculating a lease contract. Um, this is good. This is good advice, priceless advice, because you need to know how much it's going to cost you before you commit to it. And he talks about the amounts of money he's paid to people in dollars per acre. So I think he says he's never paid more than $8 an acre per year to lease land. Where I was this summer, I paid $10 an acre a year, so I leased 100 acres for $1,000. Um, he talks about his first really great lease, which is really important because you need to hear a success story, right? So that was pretty cool. and it gives you things to look for in your first lease that you go into a landowner with. Then he talks about writing the lease proposal and what you should include in there, the legal description, how long you'll be doing it, who owns the equipment, what happens to the fencing when the lease is over, things like that that you might not think that you need to cover. And then writing the lease proposal. Developing good water is essential. He talks about developing good water, why that's important, how that will increase your profitability, how much water systems cost. He tells you how to dig ponds and how you should set them up, what the watering tank should look like. He even gives you some diagrams. So there's a lot of detail just in that chapter. He also goes on to talk about fencing techniques and using fiberglass fencing with high tensile electrified wire for your perimeter fencing. And this chapter is worth the book alone. Okay, so I can't recommend this book highly enough. He talks about improving forages and utilizing every green growing leaf. Utilizing every green growing leaf. His thoughts have probably changed on that a little bit as far as I believe his argument in this book is that your cows should eat as much grass as possible, whereas now his philosophy has moved on to I want my cows to eat 60% of the grass. I want them to trample 30% onto the ground, and I want to leave 10% standing. Controlling costs and saving money and resisting the new truck syndrome. These two chapters are about finance and resisting the urge to buy a brand new truck, which is for some people can be hard to do. And I've wanted to do that in the past, to buy a brand new car because they're so nice and all that. But he really puts the money issue into perspective, and you're going to need to take these two chapters to heart if you're going to want to be profitable in doing custom grazing on leased land. Okay. Then he talks about the economics of leasing pasture, which again goes into the economic side of doing that. Low risk custom grazing, which is basically what this whole book is about, but he really goes into detail about that. Custom grazing through the winter. He talks about how you can graze in the wintertime using round bales, and I won't reveal any more details. You should check out this book definitely for that as well. Handling new arrivals gently. This is a cool chapter. You don't want your animals to be stressed when you get them. You want to have everything set up before the animals arrive, water, fencing, everything that they'll need to stay comfortable, okay? And he also talks about training the animals to the electric fence in this chapter, I believe. So, you're going to want to take these things he has to say to heart because he has a lot of experience doing these things. He talks about how MIG promotes wildlife. Again, MIG is management intensive grazing. And like I've mentioned earlier, he's moved on to mob grazing. But this chapter is insightful nonetheless. And mob grazing promotes wildlife and biodiversity to an even bigger extent than management intensive grazing does. Timber stand improvements. He's got a lot of woods around where he lives, so he talks about how he can manage those and improve those, which is really cool. It's another side of the business. He talks about managing your time effectively and having fun. He talks about how leasing land stimulates the local economy and how to keep grazing records. So, this book is fairly short too. That's what I like about it. Okay, 219 pages, or let's just call it 250. 250 pages, but he gets right to the point on everything. This is not a book like Joel Salatin's book where he likes to tell stories and everything like that. Not that I have anything wrong with that, but can't recommend No Risk Ranching by Greg Judy highly enough. Check it out.